Hi, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 94 of the Sophie Art Podcast, which is a little podcast that I do about the art and things. Tings. And this one is about the tings. It's going to be about a theory that I've got. I'll go into it a bit more in a minute, but episode 94 is actually 94 is one of my favourite numbers, because in 1994 I found and fell in love with Formula 1. The 1st of May 1994 was my first ever Formula 1 race that I watched. It was also Ayrton Senna's last race, because Ayrton Senna actually crashed and died on that day, May the 1st. And I'd never watched Formula 1 before that. Something really weird happened, because at the time, I have to be honest, I was loving it. The whole race was full of crashes and everything. And there's a wheel fell off and went into the crowd. Roland Ratzenberger, had died the day before. It was in the paper, and that's actually what made me watch it, because I thought I liked the thought of danger. So it's weird though, but at the end of the day, it was on the news that Ayrton Senna had died. And what's strange is I burst into tears. I didn't know Ayrton Senna or nothing, but I burst into tears in a way as if I knew him. And from that day forwards, Formula 1, it became a really important part of my life. And even now, 25 years later? Yeah, 26 years later, I still love Formula 1. It helped me as well, because Formula 1 kind of helped me get through my social anxiety and stuff. Back then, when I was really suffering with social anxiety, but Formula 1 gave me something to look forward to each week, so that was quite exciting. And talking about Formula 1, so this week I've actually not looked at anything to buy, apart from one day I went up to Exeter to see my gender therapist, and in the shop, in this video game shop, a second-hand shop, they had a racing wheel for the PS2 made by Logitech, really good wheel, and it was £1, which is amazing. It's got pedals and everything, so I thought I'm not going to let that go for £1. And I have got a PS2 under the bed with Gran Turismo, so I just thought that's quite amazing. But the thing is, that's the only thing I've bought. So this week, so far, I've only spent £1, and I bought a game as well, so that's 50p. So I'm doing quite well this week. And what I've also done is deleted all of the things off of on my mobile. I've deleted all the websites, so I'm not going to be tempted by that. So I'm slowly working through it. I have to see what happens. But with us today's little Dennis, and I've promoted him. So he's now going to be the little co-host. So he's a new co-host for the podcast, is little Dennis. He's very happy about that. But bing! Little Dennis has started this one, so we're going to jump into the episode. You can find show notes and everything at sophielawson.com. I still haven't bothered updating the website. I can't really be bothered. So I'll still put the podcast in there and the show notes and stuff, which is good. But you can also find this as a video on youtube.com/sophielawson. And I'll put links and everything in there. So let's get into this episode. So this is quite a weird one. Also, I've been doing my studying. I'm nearly at the end of this course. It's how to draw dynamic folds and wrinkles with Shauna Tenney. At the moment, she's got me drawing different types of fabrics, to get the textures. It's really fascinating, actually. So I'm right near the end, and once I've finished it, I'll do a little video talking about the course, because I've been taking notes as I've been doing the course, and there's positives and negatives to this one. So I'm quite excited to talk about it. It'll probably be maybe 2 weeks, I think, something like that. But let's get into this episode. So this is definitely going to be a brain dump episode, where I'll just talk and see what happens. So I'm going to be talking about a theory which I spoke about before. I think it was about episode 30 or something. It's quite a long time ago, maybe about a year ago. But what happens is, as you study stuff, you get more and more information, and then you gather more information. It sort of, you start putting it into your theory, and then before you know it, it gets bigger, and stuff that you couldn't quite work out before, you get a new bit of like information. Suddenly it makes sense, and it makes your theory make a bit more sense. The thing is, I don't think there's any way to prove this. But the theory is all to do with what I said before was, I think we are all living. This happened after my first ever lucid dream. I had a lucid dream probably about a year and a half ago, and when I came out of it, it was a series of false awakenings where you think you've woken up, and then all of a sudden you realise that you haven't woken up, you're still dreaming. So then you wake up again, and you think you've woken up, but you're still asleep, you're still dreaming, and then it can keep going, and this went on for about 3 or 4 times. And then when I came out of it, I felt like the feeling I had, and I had no reason to think this, I just had this sense that it felt to me like somebody had created the dream realm, and they were like putting us into this dream realm. And I think what they're doing is, when we're in a dream realm, I think we're either downloading or uploading information, like all of our day's events and stuff. I think when you're sleeping, I think you're transferring data into this like big database, which is what this theory is about. But it felt to me like somebody, it could almost be like a virus. A virus had created a sub-program, which was the dream realm, and they were trying to recreate reality inside of the dream realm. But what they were doing, they hadn't created reality, they were trying to replicate it. So what they did was they reverse engineered reality, which is what you would do if you wanted to work out how to make something. Like if you had like a little racing car made out of Lego bricks and you didn't make it, what you could do is, if you had a load of bricks, you could take it apart and you would be able to recreate it using the bricks. But if, say, this little racing car had like electric inside of it, you wouldn't be able to reverse engineer that electric. So you'd end up with like a racing car made of bricks, which didn't move because it didn't have the electric bit. So it felt a bit like what had happened was they created this dream realm. So when we go to sleep, we're put into this like dream realm so we can upload and download our data. But they hadn't quite worked out how to put electric and stuff. So like when you turn the lights on and off in a dream, if you turn the lights on and off, 9 times out of 10 the lights won't work, and so then you can realise you're dreaming. So, and I started thinking, well, why is that? Because at first I thought it was just me, and then when I looked into it, I realised that this is like a common thing. Like pretty much everybody says if lights do not work in a lucid dream, which says to me that how can it be consistently the same for everybody dreaming? When the dream is made in your head, you would think that would mean that your head is making it, but it seems as if there's rules in the dream realm. But so I got this feeling that it was a little bit negative at the time. I think I spoke about it a little bit on the podcast, but I had this sense that maybe something is, let's just say, trapping us in the dream realm, keeping us in there. Yeah, so because like when you become lucid, you try to wake up, sometimes you end up in a false awakening. Almost, it seems to me like a waiting room. It's like they put you into this waiting room before you actually wake up. I know it sounds a bit bonkers, but because what ends up happening is, the more you look into this, the more you realise that reality is exactly the same as a dream. It's just a stable one because of time. If you didn't have time in this reality, it would be exactly the same as the dreams. So the only thing that's different between reality and the dream realm for me is time, which kind of goes into this little theory thing here. So that was the first thing I was thinking about, and I just sort of threw it to the back of my head and had sort of forgotten about it. And this week, when I started thinking about all this stuff, all of a sudden that came back into, I sort of thought about it a bit more. But my theory before was, we're each living inside of our own universe, and everybody else in the universe, they're not actually conscious. We're the only conscious one inside of our universe. everybody else, every single person is actually not conscious. They're playing out probabilities. So what happens is everybody's got their own universe where they're conscious, but inside of that universe, everybody else exists inside of your universe. But then that other person has their own universe, and you exist inside of their universe as a probability. And a probability is based off of all of the versions of you in all of these universes. So like when you go to sleep, you're downloading this information and uploading it, which is, it's putting the probability of you doing stuff into the database. So that the AI units, it sounds mad, but like the AI versions of you will act the way you are most likely to act. So in a strange way, that it is you, but it's not you, because the only difference is they haven't got free will. They will be acting completely off of the numbers, off the numbers in the database. Whereas you, as a conscious one, you have the ability to change. So you have the free will to change. But what's really weird is even if you're not fully conscious, even you as the conscious one, knowing that you're still going to end up doing things off of the probability, because it's more probable. And this is why, because I've seen so many experiences, I've had so many things in my life where I feel like I slightly become possessed, especially when I'm in social situations. Even though I know that there's nothing to be scared of and stuff, it is like I suddenly become possessed, and I find it hard to speak or something in groups. And then afterwards I look and I think, why couldn't I just break that little like habit thing? And it kind of, I feel like it's because you were acting off of the probability. So the probability was so high that you were not going to speak in that situation, that even with your free will, you were not able to like push it over. But if you keep trying, and if you keep trying, in the end, you're going to be able to increase the probability, because then all the other ones will do it as well. And then once all the other ones will do it, it's going to be much easier for you. Sounds, yeah. So, but this goes into, yes, everyone's, but your free will, I said even your free will is based off of probability. I've got scribbled notes down here, so I'm going to have to try and make sense of it. Again, that little thing that I thought about, which we're all in our own universe, I thought about it and then I just forgotten about it again. I've thrown it to the back of my head, and that was like, that must have been about a year ago I thought about that, and I hadn't thought about it since really. And then this week I was meditating. There's somebody called Joe Dispenza who does this meditation, and I must have listened to him. I must have listened to his meditation about 1,000 times. Definitely started in 2013. So I would say at least 500 times I've heard these meditation. It's an hour long, and what he does is he starts talking about space. Because for the first 20 minutes, you're focusing on your body. You're basically taking parts of your body, and he wants you to focus on the space that your lips take up in space. And then he moves on to your hands, your arms, your upper body, and then before you know it, he's saying, can you imagine the space that your body takes up in space? And then he starts moving out and he says, can you imagine the space that the room you're in takes up in space? And all the other times before this, I've visualised, what I've seen my room as a cube in space, surrounded by darkness. And then what would happen is, in my meditation, this little cube that my room was in, it would be my room as if there was nothing else that existed outside of my room. And it would start, it was as if I became like the camera, and my room would just slowly vanish, and I would be zooming out in the universe, and it would put into perspective just how small this room is. And then you end up just, it puts into perspective how like tiny we are really. And so that's what has always happened. But this time, what he says after that is he says, can you imagine the space that space takes up in space. It's getting a bit bonkers here. And I've never had this before, but what happened was this little, I couldn't see anything, this little dot, a little point came into my visions. So I saw this little dot, and then all of a sudden that little dot, it went sideways, and it became a line. Then all of a sudden that little line, it went upwards, and it became a square. And then it's like it rotated a bit, and that square came outwards, and it became a cube. And then it started rotating. So I had this cube rotating, and all of a sudden the cube popped back down into that point. And I was lying there meditating. This meditation is an hour, and normally I would just stay there for the hour. But what happened was I said out loud, the whole of space is inside of itself. And like I can't really even explain it, but I could really feel that everything is inside of a little point. And like, yeah, if you pull it out, you've got space, but the whole space is inside of itself, which kind of goes into like time, because time is inside of itself. Like, if you can get outside of time, that means time does exist and it doesn't exist at the same moment, which means that the whole of time exists, but at the same moment, nothing exists. And it's kind of the same thing here, that like that little dot, nothing exists because it's just a little dot, but at the same time everything exists because it's inside of that little dot. So if you just pull the dot out, you end up with the whole of space. It was so amazing that I stopped the meditation. I just wrote it. I drew like some little diagrams because I just didn't want to forget it. And then the more I thought about this, the more I started thinking, like, this actually kind of goes into my little theory about we're each a universe. What I'm thinking is we are each that little dot, which is actually the cube. And then the more I thought about this, it started to get really quite visual, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain it. But because if each of us is a little dot, you could have a row of these dots all next to each other, but if one of those dots pulls out into the cube now has inside of itself all of the other dots, which would be other people or other universes. So each of these cubes is a person. The person is the little dot, the cube is like the universe, so you are the universe. But inside of that cube, which is the universe, you would have all these other dots, which would be other people. And then if you then pulled out, it gets quite weird here, you've got a cube with these little dots inside of it, which are other universes, but inside of that universe, you could actually pull one of the other dots into another cube. So you've now got inside of the cube, you've got another cube inside of that cube. You've got a universe within a universe. And then it goes on forever, because inside of that universe that you've just pulled out, you've got more dots. And then you start pulling them out. It's never ending. You've got cubes within cubes. But the amazing thing is, if you squished the original cube, which is the universe, into the dot, all of the other ones will go with it. So in a strange way, you have infinity inside of a tiny little dot, which is crazy. But what gets really weird here is, so I've been watching, only this week, I started watching a video, Anthony Peake, talking about out-of-body experiences. So I had this video, and right after I'd done this meditation, I was sitting with it, and I was cooking my dinner, and I put this video on with Anthony Peake. Now, I've never ever in my whole life, I've never heard anyone talk about a dot becoming like a cube or something. Now, what's weird, I'll try to link to the video, I'll try to remember the video, I'll link to it in the description. Anthony Peake is talking, and I think I was making my dinner, so I was listening but not looking. He suddenly said, he's talking about our body, but he moved on to point of awareness. Was it point of awareness or something like that? And I heard the word point, and I looked up, and the thing he's doing, this is crazy. He's standing in front of an audience, and he goes, if you take that point and you move it across, you get a line. If you move that up, you get a square. If you move that out, you get a cube. I paused the video and I thought, what is going on here? Because like the synchronicity of that is insane. And what I've noticed is the universe does that. It gives you a synchronicity thing. Or it puts synchronicities in when you're... It does that when it wants you to really remember something. Because if he had just been talking about that and I hadn't had that meditation experience, I would have just listened and thought, that's interesting. And then because this little thing I saw in meditation, if he hadn't said what he said, I would have thought, that's interesting. But when you put them both together, it suddenly becomes powerful. And then it was after that I started thinking about these cubes could have multiple dots inside of them. Because what he said was, when I resumed the video, he then said, which I'd never thought about or even heard of, he said, if you take that cube and you pull that cube out, you can actually end up with something called a Tesseract. I can't remember the name of it. It's a 4D shape. So the dot, the line is a 2D shape. The line is, I suppose, 1D. The square is 2D. The cube is 3D. This next thing is a 4D shape, which I can't even really imagine what it would look like. But it's going to look like, I think, a cube with cubes inside of itself. So you can't even... I don't think a human would actually be able to even visualise what that would look like, because we're 3D beings. But he said, and then when he said that, I started thinking, because what I thought was, I thought like, what did I think? In that meditation, it's as if the synchronicity of that was giving me more information to add on to my meditation, but it kind of felt quite powerful. So then what I started thinking was, it gets crazy now, I suppose, even more crazy. Effectively, what it means is, it means this reality is a virtual reality, because we are outside of the system. We're probably not even the dot, I don't know. But if we are the dot, it's going to be like a sea, whatever base reality is, it's going to be like a sea of dots. And each of those little dots, like I said, is a universe. And then you've got all these universes within the universes. But if you've got like a sea of dots, I started thinking that, I don't know why I thought this, but I've wrote down here, the aliens, like the greys, they seem to pop in and out of existence. And like UFOs, they seem to pop in and out of existence. So what I'm thinking is, they are, like, if they are maintenance beings, so they exist inside of the base reality, but they're almost like maintaining the virtual reality, stop it breaking or something. And they're also maintaining the dream realms. But this gets really... I've got so much I want to say, because it goes into so many things, but the dream realm, for instance, when you're dreaming, that could be you going into one of these universes that's inside your universe. That's why it's kind of like dreamy, because it's a universe that's overlapping your universe. I got so many things, I can't quite explain the things I want to say. It's quite annoying, really. I can sort of see it in my head. So what you end up with is, and when you become lucid, you're becoming aware inside one of these sub-universes. So then this is what I'm saying. This is how Force Awakenings might be working, is when you have a string of Force Awakenings, it could be that you've gone inside of a universe within a universe within a universe. So you're now inside of one of those cubes, you're inside one of the cubes that say a cube within a cube within a cube within a cube, say number 5. You wake up from that, you're only waking up into cube number 4. That's why you then have to keep waking up to get back to your actual cube, which is your stable reality. And then, like, you start thinking about something that I visualise this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I'll try to explain it, but in my head, I don't know if this is right, but in my head, I thought to myself, if you was able to, let's say we're outside of this universe, like we're the little dot, so we can sort of, we're outside of time, because time is inside of the cube. If you could squish the cube into a straight line, and then if you had that straight line and you started spinning it, I'm sure it would turn into a wormhole, because that straight line would end up, depending on how you're spinning it, you'd be able to create like a wormhole, which would be, that wormhole would effectively be going through the cube. Because if you were going through that straight line as you're spinning it, and then you stopped spinning it and popped it back into the cube, effectively you'd be able to jump across large amounts of time. And if you was something inside of the cube, if somebody else was, because I've also thought, if other beings in the other universes or outside of the universe, like the Greys, there might be beings outside of this reality which can actually put themselves into one of the probability-based beings. So inside of my little cube, inside of this universe, a being outside of the universe, which is like observing everything, it could put itself into one of the other beings, and so you would then have 2 consciousnesses inside of the universe. And this would be somebody who you meet and they feel really special, or somebody who you meet who's guiding you, because that's somebody who's become conscious and they're guiding you. But what I'm saying is, if they were outside of the system and they were moving around the cube from using these like wormholes, because the thing is, if you're inside of the cube and somebody squished the cube into a straight line, I feel like you wouldn't notice. To you, the cube would still be, I feel like the universe would still be solid to you, because I feel like it's the other being that it would be squished for. It gets a bit weird, but because I started thinking, like, what I was going to say was, though, if that being did the wormhole thing and you was inside of the cube looking, all you would see is the being pop into existence as if it had teleported. And that's what they say, like with UFOs and stuff, they see things popping in and out. It starts to explain ghosts and stuff. Like, ghosts could be a being that's inside one of these other universes. It's not a conscious you, it's a probability-based being inside one of the cubes, inside one of your cubes. So that's why it kind of looks a bit like holographic-y, because it's not really in your universe. It's like this overlap thing. Now this gets incredibly weird, because all these little dots, I see like a timeline of these dots. So you're going to end up with time within time, because the cube itself is going to have sort of like time, but these little dots are going to be a representation of time in like a straight line. So, for instance, what ends up happening is, basically all we are is data. All we are is data. That's why when you go to sleep and you're dreaming, the data is getting uploaded and downloaded into the database, which, like, mystics and ancient people called the Akashic records. And that's when they go out of body, they go into this place which they call the Akashic records, where all of time and all the probabilities exist. So you can start seeing the future and stuff like that. What I'm saying is, if we are, say, well, this goes into loads of stuff. Reincarnation could be you going into a cube within the cube. Because you could take your consciousness into a subcube. So that subcube would then become your universe. So you would end up it's a bit like those Russian dolls. You've got things within things. But what I was saying was, let's say universe number 1 is represented as dot number 1, and you're like dot number 5. So all the dots are separate because they're not touching. They only touch each other when they become the cubes. So what happens is dot number 1 becomes a cube. And inside of that, say the size of that cube has like 10 dots inside of it. So that means that cube has 10 other universes overlapping with it. So what that means is the data from dot number 1, which is being, so it's like a human, is a consciousness. It's part of the main consciousness, splits itself up into these little dots. And the first dot, so human number 1, that one creates its life and stuff, and all of its data is held within that little dot. Dot number 2 doesn't have the information of dot number 2, but when it becomes a cube, the information of dot number 1 goes into cube number 2. So that means everything can be separate, but it's all linked, because it's sharing the data between the two universes, even though all the information is actually still separate. But what ends up happening is, dot number 5, you really need to see this, like really need to visualise this, because what you end up with is you end up with a line of, say you've got like 100 dots, and you turn each of the dots into cubes. What you would see is, you would see a row of overlapping cubes. So cube number 1 would overlap with cube number 2, 3, 4 and 5, and the edge of cube number 1 would be inside of cube number 5. So they would be like touching. And that's where I start thinking that could be where you start getting ghosts or something. It's information from cube number 1 which is not quite complete. So you're only seeing half the information in cube number 5. So like universe number 5, being number 5, could start seeing entities from cube number 1, but they wouldn't be complete because it's not fully overlapping. All the information isn't quite getting to it. But then what happens is, like say you move on to cube number 20. Cube number 20 isn't directly linked to cube number 1, so it's not getting any of the information. But what happens is, because cube number 1 is overlapping with cube number 5, which has got the information, cube number 5 overlaps up until cube number 10. So that means the information from cube number 1 carries on to cube number 10. So that means the whole of timeline, say you've got like 1,000 years, you've got like 100 beings, all of those beings are keeping and storing information from the very first moment of time. And so the whole of time is being stored across every single human being, but that human being is only actually storing its own data, which is its own timeline. So this is how you start getting like loads of weird things like past life regression and stuff, previous lives, and you start getting information from, like when you go in, they talk about when you go into DMT, like what's it called, psychedelic experiences and stuff. They start being able to teleport back in time and stuff. So this could actually be that it's because the time exists inside of you, but not directly. So that's why you can sort of go there, but you have to come back. Bit weird. But I just find it, I love this. And you can, if you visualise it in your head, visualise a cube, visualise a line of cubes with cubes coming out of those cubes coming out of those cubes, and then visualise all of those cubes overlapping with each other, you end up with this just incredibly... It's amazing. I actually want to draw it. You wouldn't be able to draw it, I don't think. You would just end up with this mass of... I wonder what sort of shape it would make. It must end up making a shape. It'd be quite funny if it ends up making a giant cube, and then that giant cube can squish itself down. That's what I'm saying. How do we know that this universe we're inside of isn't one of the cubes inside of a bigger cube? That's what I'm saying. You don't know. So, and then it starts going into this thing where they say, like Buddhism talks about this reality is a dream. There's a being dreaming this reality, and then we can dream realities. So you start to think, well, is that what's going on? Where it's to do with these cubes. So that the original being is its own dot. I am a dot within the being's universe. Fascinating. I love this. Have I got anything else here? Oh yeah, I don't know why I said this, but I said time is stored in DNA, because they said something about, I've heard on a podcast something about if you took all of the DNA and like stretch, what is it? I don't know what I'm talking about here. But if you took the DNA and stretched it, it's something like it wraps around the universe hundreds, millions of times or something. It's so basically that could be how it's storing data. That could be like the DNA could almost be, if you, in the old days we used to have these video cassettes which had tape on it, and I look at it and I think, is the DNA like the tape? So as we're going through life, it's like the tape. The DNA is like our tape. That's what's recording everything. Because when people die or near-death experience, they say the life flashes before their eyes, which that means our whole life must be getting recorded. So I'm wondering whether the DNA is almost like it's the way the system is recording everything, which means you could start jumping back and forwards and stuff. Yeah, because if it's always stored there, is it stored there as just a visual thing, or is it possible to keep going back? Yeah, go back and relive it or something. Fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah, something else I thought about. I can't quite visualise this yet, but if you took a cube and you spun it sideways, and then you spun it whilst it's spinning sideways, you spin it horizontally, so it's spinning like one of those tops. It's like a spinning top. I don't know what shape that's going to make. I think it's going to make a diamond, I'm not sure. But if you spin that the other way, so you spin it horizontally and then you spin it vertically, or you spin it vertically and then you spin it horizontally, so it's now spinning. It's spinning and spinning. It's spinning sideways and it's spinning the other way. What shape is that going to make? Because I wonder, is that going to make a cube? No, it's not. Is that going to make a sphere? And then you start thinking, well, is that sphere the original dot? So then you end up with a situation where the universe itself is the dot. So it becomes a massive paradox where the dot is the universe and the universe is the dot. So in other words, I came up with this phrase like months ago, and I love it because it's quite simple and it explains this paradox. I thought, what if the creator's creations are creating the creator? So in other words, if the creator doesn't exist, there's no creations, and those creations are creating the creator. So if the creations don't exist, there's no creator, but if there's no creator, there's no creations. So it's like the creations need the creator, but the creator only exists because of the creations. So it's a paradox. I'm wondering if that's what's going on. You could have the cube spinning is the dot. So you end up with a situation where the universe is inside of itself and it has to always exist because the process of the universe evolving creates the universe. It's gonna end up like with a big loop, a never-ending loop where the thing creates itself, and then this gets a bit weird. You can end up the process of that thing creating itself is the original thing, but inside of that it's happening all the time. So this is how you end up with cubes within cubes, and it all starts with a single dot. Which, what do they say with the Big Bang? They said the Big Bang came from a point of nothingness. So you've got a single point and it explodes into everything. And then it could be that everything is going to end up going back into like a little dot, like looping around. And then you've got black holes within the universe. Like those black holes could be representing, well, it could be anything. That could be wormholes going through the cube. Yeah, there's so many things here, because I also thought if you've got that cube, if you could slice the cube, that could be like one timeline. Then if you had another slice, that could be a different timeline. So what you end up with is you end up with a cube representing all probabilities and all possibilities of your life. So you imagine it starting at the very bottom of this cube, and you have every single decision you make branches off, yes or no, basically, fear or love. It should all probability based off the data from all these other cubes, because even though everyone's separate, everyone is linked together. So everything that everyone else is doing in their universes is changing the probabilities of what you're going to be doing. It gets a bit weird. But then what happens then is every single probability exists as like a slice inside your universe. And all you're doing as the consciousness, all you're doing is picking a path through the cube. So it's like every single possibility of your life exists in the cube, but you're only aware of one of them, because that's the path that you're going through it. Yeah, I love this. I love thinking about this. I want to visualize it, but I don't know how to. I don't know how to visualize cubes within cubes, because it's getting a bit weird here. It's like you've got space within space. Fascinating though. I love this. I just have to see what happens. I'm going to try and meditate on this and try to visualize. I want to try and visualize a cube within a cube, and then cubes within that cube. But anyway, I think little Dennis is getting a bit confused here, aren't you? So that's little Dennis says it's the end of this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. And like I said, I'm trying to. I just want to talk about it really, because I can sort of, in my head, I can see it as a fully formed thing, but I can't understand it. So I wanted to talk about it to try and understand it. And what I will say is, I started reading this book straight, because what happened was, after that experience, and when Anthony Peake started talking about this thing, I went out and bought a couple of these books. So I've started reading this book called The Out-of-Body Experience, The History and Science of Astral Travel by Anthony Peake. Because I love some little out-of-body experiences. Last night I had a bonkers bunch of dreams. I was having false awakenings, and then I had a false awakening where I woke up. What happened was I had a false awakening. I woke up, so I'm awake inside of the thing, and I was saying to people, these false awakenings are so real that I can't even tell when I'm. I was just saying that these false awakenings are so real that I'm finding it hard to tell when I'm asleep or awake. Like in the dreams, it's so easy to think you're you're awake when you're actually still asleep. And I was in front of people talking about this, and then I woke up, and I woke up and realised I was talking to people inside of a dream, saying how weird it is, or how hard it is to tell when I'm dreaming. But I was actually dreaming. It's crazy. It's like, that's like some sort of meta thing where you're inside of a dream telling people how hard it is to tell when you're dreaming, but you're actually dreaming. I love it. I love this because you wake up from it. And you're feeling. I love it. I love it because you're actually experiencing it. So whatever's going on, it is real, whatever that means. It kind of goes into this week's little inspirational quote. So it's from the foreword of this book, and the foreword is by Arvin Laszlo, who is a scientist, I think, a little scientist. He's got a quote here which he's quoted from somebody else, and it's a bit of a confusing quote, but I think actually it fits in with this episode because it's a bit like one of these things you have to think about. The quote is actually from Bertrand Russell, and he says, "Common sense, if true, leads to physics. Physics, if true, shows that common sense is false. Therefore, common sense is, if true, is false." Again, that's like a big paradox because it's the same thing. It's if that is true, then that's false. But if that's false, then that means that has to be true. But it can't be true because you've just said it's false. I love that. I love stuff like this because it really gets you thinking. It's a little bit like there's a video game on the PS3 called Portal 2, and what it does is you're in this world, and you've got this gun which you can shoot at a wall, and what it does is you shoot it. You've got this gun, and you can shoot it at a wall, and then shoot it at another wall, and what it does is you shoot a little entrance spot on that wall, and wherever you place the next spot, it creates an exit point. So what you end up doing is you end up creating these little wormholes. So what you can do is, in this video game, it really messes with your head, because say you're at the bottom of this massive building, and there's a ladder, but the ladder's broken, and there's a room at the very top, and you need to get up there. What you can do is, it's impossible to get up there, but you can shoot a hole at the wall, right next to where you're standing. You can then look up at the ceiling, shoot a hole at the ceiling, at the ceiling, so when you walk through the hole that's right next to you, you pop out of the hole that you've put in the ceiling. So what you end up doing is, you end up being able to effectively sort of teleport across the level, which goes into what I was talking about earlier with these little wormhole things. And I love that game because what it does is it messes with your head, but then you end up getting really, it makes you feel clever, really. It does make you feel clever, but you start realising how incredible it would be if you could start jumping around like reality and something. But this week's little inspirational quote is, "Common sense, if true, leads to physics. Physics, if true, shows that common sense is false. Therefore, common sense, if true, is false." Ding! Bertrand Russell. Little Russell.